This episode was made possible by our generous patrons.
Welcome to episode 140 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book
And then see the movie.
I'm Luke.
And I'm James.
And this week we discuss Elmore Leonard's 1990 novel, Get Shorty. All right, James, this is a well-known, famous crime writer, Elmore Leonard, who I have never read. And I'm excited to say, now I've read an Elmore Leonard novel.
Yeah, never read. This episode was also commissioned by one of our patrons.
Yeah. And
I can totally see why this person wanted us to read this book. It's so very much in both of our fields, like so very much in the ink and in the film of it all. And also, yeah, this is my first Elmore Leonard novel, but he felt very familiar, and I have some very specific reasons why.
So you mentioned Jamie D. I actually don't know if she's read this or not. I'd be curious to hear from her, actually. She might just be a fan of the movie and suspected that the book might be kind of up her alley. And sure enough, it was. And I think you're touching on some of the reasons why this was kind of a fascinating read, because it is, in a metafictional way, about storytelling and about the film industry, yet it is a novel. So there's a lot of layers to it that go beyond your typical sort of crime thriller.
I'm gonna make the easy comparison here. That was the first thing that started standing out to me, and maybe it'll just, you know, it'll paint me as one of these like basic film school students, but I was getting mad Tarantino vibes from this story.
Okay.
And I think it mostly has something to do with the fact that it's like a love letter to film. It's a story about a love letter to film in a certain time period. And there's more to it there, but it also has this sort of, it reminds me a lot of the way Tarantino approaches his dialogue and his characters and the way that events happen. I think there are moments in this book that are out of order. You know, we're getting sure. Sort of a nonlinear narrative. I looked into it a little bit. I was like, have I read Elmore Leonard? I got to see what else he's written. And I found out that he wrote the book that Jackie Brown was based on. And I was like, That is exactly why I was getting Tarantino vibes.
Yeah, one of the few adaptations, maybe the only one that Tarantino's done, you know, where it wasn't just a wholly out of his own mind kind of thing. And I think if Tarantino was asked for influential writers, I wouldn't be surprised to hear Elmore Leonard listed, you know?
Right.
And he's hugely influential for a lot of writers. I don't read a ton of crime fiction, but I know that he is lauded as this super well-known writer who has gone on to influence a lot of modern crime writers.
It reminded me a lot of Scorsese in this same time period in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. And that was sort of my whole melding of all of this is a sort of mafia Scorsese written, Tarantino directed story. Like that's what was really speaking to me during this. So, you know, that's high praise. I really enjoyed the story and the characters in it and the weird quirks and the way that the story was kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned how familiar he may seem. I don't know if you've ever watched the TV series Justified, but that is...
I haven't.
Yeah, that is based off of one of his short stories. And Raylan Givens, to me, and Chili Palmer have some similar crossover, mainly just how cool they are all the time. Like they're just so cool. Like nothing bothers them, and that he writes that kind of character just really, really well. Yeah,
it was fascinating because this is the most in control of their emotions kind of ex-mobster I've ever had a story about.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
He was very much like knew exactly how to like turn the screws on people and without even having to get violent, and then would get violent if needed. But yeah, I was just surprised. I think I mentioned in our last episode when we were talking about the fact that this was our next project, I mentioned that I think that I had seen it. I don't think I have. I don't think I've seen the movie or read the story before, so I'm pretty fresh to this. And
I'm excited. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but a lot of it was coming back as I was reading this book, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I do remember this. So I'm excited to get back to it. But that's cool if you've never seen it. So I want to approach this this episode a little bit from the perspective of, at least for early on, people who are curious about the book, who maybe have seen the movie and are curious about, like, is the book worth checking out? If I've seen this movie, I guess I'm not as worried about spoilers as much as I want to, like, talk a little bit at the start with some general thoughts about how this book read for you. Like, did you enjoy it as a novel?
I did, yeah. I do have to say, with all the praise that I've heaped on it, it took me a little bit to click into the story. I was finding myself not very focused when I was reading the first few chapters. Mm-hmm. And I think it had something to do with the fact that I think the first third of the book is setting up the events that will eventually unfold. So there's a lot of setup going on. And it's it's not a slight against the story. I just was noticing that I wasn't engaged right away. But once things started to cascade, it all made sense. That was the reason for the setup.
Yeah, and I was a little mixed on it early on, but it kind of won me over. And one of the reasons I was a little mixed was actually sort of lampshaded within the narrative. And that was, I was having trouble liking anybody.
Right.
I felt like everybody in this is true in, like, Tarantino and other films like that. It's like everybody is kind of terrible. Even Chili Palmer is not a super likable guy. I think he's quite obviously sexist, racist, and kind of an asshole. The one thing he has going for him is there's just something undeniably cool and engaging about a guy who keeps his cool and is calm in the face of everything, people exploding at him and yelling at him or behaving in ways, and he is just calm and cool and even keel throughout. And the power of a person like that, I think, is something Elmore Leonard knows well, and that's why we see a character like that can become like a Raylan Givens, right? Who can be really engaging. I know you said you haven't seen it, but I have watched all of Justified, and I like that character. I think he's a really dramatic character and very interesting one. So different than Chili Palmer. I don't want to say they're one and the same, but I definitely think they're cut from the same cloth.
That's one that I will be watching, because I also love Timothy Olyphant. Like, I think he's fantastic. So, like, the fact that I haven't seen it is kind of a bummer. But I understand. I feel like I've just from cultural context understand sort of like what the show is about, and like that ton of sort of lines up with the kind of character that Chili would be. I see the comparison you're making.
Yeah, I mean, he does this character really well. That is sort of he's almost a fish out of water. And it feels that way a little bit with Raylan too, but not to get into too much of the Justified storyline. But to focus here, it's like what that makes this story so interesting is you take this, like you said, he's a character straight out of a Scorsese film. He's Robert De Niro, and it's funny because that's like his favorite actor, right? Like he's Robert De Niro in all these movies. And you take him,
the movie
and you
references.
What's that?
Movie references were rampant, and and for me, amazing. I was really happy to. It was like I said, it felt like Tarantino. It felt like you were watching something that was just fully referencing, and it was a love letter. And we'll get into this in a second, but it was also sort of a takedown of like the Hollywood system.
Well, because the Hollywood system that we're presented with is kind of terrible. Like it's filled with all these corrupt people, and the desperation of chasing the dream that Hollywood represents is sort of poisonous to all the characters in the book. And then you enter Chili Palmer, who is, like I said, this sort of Robert De Niro from Goodfellas or something. Like he's just this badass character who we're familiar with, but you're taking him and you're putting him in the movie business. And he sort of earnestly loves film and wants to be involved in movie making. Yet all of his skill sets are with being a wise guy and being a tough guy. And the way that comes in is just really fascinating.
Yeah, and how, because of the sort of viper's nest that Hollywood is, how like his skills he's able to put them to good use there, and I like the idea of a character who it's just like everyone loves movies is something that I felt like all these characters that we meet, they're all referencing movies, talking about actors they love, performances they love, and they're all like willing to claw their way to get these movies made. Some of them for fame, some of them for the art of it all. Really, really interesting sort of framework to set this story up in. Yeah.
So I also want to heap some more praise on this, but I do have some more criticisms. But first off, Elmore Leonard is sort of really well known for his prose style. And I did find it incredibly engaging and notable because whole passages would go by, I don't know if you noticed this or not, where it was almost completely dialogue. And seamlessly moving from dialogue to interior monologue that was almost indistinguishable. Mm-hmm. So whenever you were in a character's head, they would think in the way that they speak in a really fascinating way. And very, very little descriptions of setting. You almost always had to sort of design the set in your mind based off of context clues. You know, like they'd talk about, he maybe throw out like one detail here or there, but it'd be a lot of like, you know, he'd say to that person something and he'd reference like the scotch they're holding or something, or he'd reference the clothes they're wearing. Like someone would compliment them on the clothes they're wearing. And so instead of describing the clothes, you're now having a character talk about another character's clothes, and then you can take the step in your mind of filling in what the scene looks like.
Somebody's hair at one point is compared to Michael Douglas in Wall Street. Yeah. So it's like sort of you can immediately imagine what that looks like, and then you can sort of be like, okay, this is what this character looks like, and using references almost sometimes to set the scene.
So he's well known for this style. He's incredibly he has a remarkable ear for dialogue, and I think that's one of the things that has held true for everything I've been seeing, like people discussing Elmore Leonard and sort of his legacy. He said he was heavily influenced by Ernest Hemingway. Other people have made comparisons to Raymond Chandler, who is famous for his like noir fiction, which would often, you know, you talk a lot about noir film, which I know a lot of it was inspired by Raymond Chandler and maybe even adapted from some of his early novels. So I thought it was interesting to see that connection there, right? And then you see, I saw another author, Dennis Lehane, who I think is the author of like Mystic River and Shutter Island and a few others. Saying that Elmore Leonard was his major influence, and among others. So you have this like literary lineage, which I think is really fascinating, right? Of these crime writers.
To reconnect one thing that we've already established, Shutter Island, directed by Martin Scorsese.
There you go.
So there's some shared blood all over the place.
So much crossover. Well, here I wanted to read this little thing I found here. So Elmore Leonard has been called the quote Dickens of Detroit, which I think is pretty cool. But although his favorite epithet was one given to him by Britain's New Musical Express, quote, the poet laureate of wild assholes with revolvers.
Jeez, that's awesome.
That's a cool name.
Wait, so the revolver specifically, I would assume, is like Western?
Yeah, so he actually got his start writing Westerns. You may know of 3:10 to Yuma as an adaptation of a short story that he wrote.
Wow.
Yeah, the original 70s 3:10 to Yuma, too. You know.
That's wild. Yeah, I didn't know.
So, and then just to finish this out, his ear for dialogue has been praised by writers such as Saul Bellow, Martin Amis, and Stephen King. Got to bring it to Stephen King. Stephen King has even called him the great American writer.
Wow, that's high praise. That's very cool.
Yeah, I think King recognized some other stuff I was talking about. His ear for dialogue is just kind of unparalleled, and that was something that was striking to me because I think as writers, when we're trying to get better, one of the things that that serves you well is to identify areas where you feel like you need to improve. And for me, dialogue has always been difficult. Not saying I can't ever do it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But some people just have a natural talent for dialogue, and some people don't. And for me, I kept thinking like this is going to be a writer that I could go to if I want inspiration, because I can see how well he does it. It appears so effortless, yet it isn't. It's very difficult to pull this off and to have it not obnoxious yet still feel so true. I saw when he was discussing writing, one of the things he said that I thought was notable. He said, "My most important rule is one that sums up all 10," was referencing his 10 rules of writing that he put out. If it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. And then he also hinted, I try to leave out the parts that readers tend to skip, which is something that I've seen like many writers mention as well. But if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it, I think is fascinating because very little in this book, if anything, seemed like writing. It felt like it was being transcribed directly, you know, even when we're in their interior monologues. So if you're into that sort of thing and you want to see a writer who's doing that at a very high level, then I recommend I recommend him. I haven't read a lot of other. I mean, this is my first Elmore Leonard novel thing I've read, so I can't tell you if this is like the best entry point into his work. It feels in some ways very self-aware, and I suspect that this novel was written with the intention of it being adapted. It feels very much like it was made to be a movie.
It feels like the kind of thing Hollywood loves Hollywood, so it feels like the kind of thing that like if you were trying to get something adapted, you might want to lean into the Hollywood aspect of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one definitely does. So I would actually be really curious to go back and read some of his earlier stuff, like if we ever covered 310 to Yuma, to see like his earlier work that was just a straight up Western. I'd be fascinated. Some other adaptations that have been made from his work. You already mentioned Jackie Brown. We also have Out of Sight, which was a 1998 movie starring George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez, directed by Steven Soderbergh. And then we have, the television series Justified. And then they also made a TV series, Get Shorty, that came out 2017. I think it ran for 2 or 3 seasons, I was seeing, and was not... It was relatively positive reviews from what I was seeing. Like I didn't know about it. It was on like Epix or something channel, so I never really heard of it, but it did run.
Wow.
It had Ray Romano in it.
That could be something that we revisit at some point for a bonus episode, I guess, if we want to do a whole season.
A full season, or at least a few episodes of season 1 or something. Yeah, that could be interesting.
Could be cool for comparison's sake, at least. So you mentioning the dialogue, I just sort of got the wheels turning, and I've been thinking about how it's conversational and it's sort of stream of consciousness, and it made me think about how screenplays are very heavily dialogue, and this being so movie centric made me think about how maybe that was it sounds like that's part of his that's part of his repertoire normally, but maybe in this case specifically he wanted it to sound sort of screenplay-ish, because there are moments where we break into screenplay in the actual book itself.
No, they definitely do go directly into screenplay, and there are times where the dialogue tags drop away, and you actually just get like name of character : and then what they say,
right?
As if you're reading a screenplay,
right?
Which I thought was fascinating how you sort of move seamlessly into that. He plays kind of fast and loose with grammar sometimes, often for certain effects. It's interesting, when I was looking at the book, I was seeing reviews sort of being critical of it for having typos and grammatical errors. And after reading it, I think those were intentional, and the reader maybe didn't pick up on it and assumed that they were accidents. But it feels like to me that this is much like a Cormac McCarthy. He has this particular style that breaks a lot of sort of conventions. And he's doing it for a reason. He's doing it for effect. And I think it's to more closely mimic like the way people speak.
Right. I did see something, and I don't know if you saw this in your research, but I did see that he with some of his stories being adapted, he also was known for writing screenplays at some point in his career. Mm-hmm. So, that's also an interesting angle as somebody who's had things adapted and somebody who has helped to adapt things or written screenplays on their own. To be sort of addressing Hollywood and the film industry is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and if you have a strength in writing dialogue, you should absolutely try your hand at writing screenplays, because they're 90% dialogue, if not more. So that's kind of like, you can't hide it with anything else. I want to know, because I kind of know personally where I fall, but I don't know for you, so I'm curious. We've read writers now throughout the podcast that run the gamut of sort of descriptive, one might call it flowery, although that sounds like I'm condemning it, but like just more descriptive, rich prose that is maybe not as immediate and fast paced as something like this. And then you have very stripped down, this writing is very stripped down, very dialogue focused. And this tends to be a hallmark of a certain kind of crime fiction. Mm-hmm. And also there was a sort of movements where this was like, oh, this is the way you write, and this other way is bad. And you know what I mean? Just like anything else, like when it started becoming all the rage, it seemed like this is the way it always should have been, like screw all this other stuff. And then you kind of have the reaction to that where people are like, actually, it's nice to sometimes, describe something in a beautiful way. And so we're going to do that again. But I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are, like what do you like, or do you like both, or do you have a preference?
I think that when you read something that is like descriptive, like you're saying, that sort of has the, it goes the extra mile to describe things and like thread in metaphor and thread in all. I really like that richness of writing. That's something that I feel like I respond well to. And you know, I think in some ways it calls attention to the fact that you're reading a book, but I like that, if that makes sense. Like I like to,
Yeah.
I like I don't mind if I understand like the medium is you're reading a book right now and it's going to be very descriptive and like take the time to show you things through the author's eyes even more than you maybe would have if it was just shown to you you know, you're getting more of, I think, the author's voice in a situation like that. And I think I prefer that in the writing that we've seen, at least so far. But like you say, there's something naturalistic. There's something very natural about something like this, the dialogue, that this is what other podcast probably sounds like. You know, it's just conversational back and forth, and that's probably similar to something in a crime drama and it gets you closer to the people in the story in certain ways.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I see the benefits of the technique, you know, but like you said, I think personally, I don't mind occasionally when I know I'm reading a book and something's being described in a beautiful way, or in an interesting way. That's okay to me, you know, because one of the things I like about reading is when I do get a new perspective on something, or an interesting perspective on something, provided through the lens of whatever the narrative is. But that's not to say that like there aren't pitfalls. And I think, you know, it sounds like a cop-out, but like you have to do it well, no matter how you're doing it. So of course you could look at writing that is like overly descriptive, and you could say, well, this is a problem. We need to strip it down. Sure. But that's also not to say that it's always bad. So, but it does work for this kind of story. I think that there's also a potential problem you can get into if you do this too much, where it can be very difficult for readers to connect emotionally with your characters. And I found that Chili, I think the fact that he is so cool all the time and doesn't ever seem to get flustered works, because this writing style doesn't really show off emotions in a way. So because he always is cool, it sort of plays into it. Mm-hmm. But if he was a character who was often having emotional reactions to things, I think sometimes we might feel disconnected from it, because we don't really get that on the page as much for people.
There is something with Chili that I wanted to mention in terms of his character. The idea that he's this big tough guy who is always confident, and I like this idea that deep down, like not even deep down, just in general, he's a huge movie fan. And like he responds to these stories, and he likes movies, and you know he looks to movies sort of for the idealized you know person, or like looks to people just like everyone does, and everyone has for as long as movies have been around, like looking to the people on the screen and being infatuated by them, and wanting to sort of imitate them and wear the clothes they wear, do the things that they do. At one point it was mentioned how some of the characters were trying, because of Scarface, they were acting and they were speaking in a certain way after seeing Scarface. And like that to me raises the idea that like movies do influence people, and they change how people, you know, how they act. And this idea that this tough guy who's always confident, has all the answers, is the same way. And then we see him pitching a movie in the beginning of the novel, which I want to talk about definitely. But the idea of pitching a movie, this guy has this story that he wants to tell, and you know, we don't really know his motivations that early on, but it seems like he just wants to get a movie made because he loves movies.
Well, it was reminding me of, I think it was a conversation we were having about The Godfather, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I was watching a Bob Marley documentary, and just the way that sort of Westerns, cowboy Westerns and mafia movies and Scarface and these kinds of things shaped how the people in Jamaica were acting during the sort of civil unrest that they had there during the time that Bob Marley was coming up. And a lot of Bob Marley songs were written about the, you know, brothers killing brothers in the streets, and the government trying to tell people what to do and manipulating factions of people and that sort of thing. So just this idea that like movies influence people in other countries, you know, like I don't, who's to say that Francis Ford Coppola realized that The Godfather would, you know, eventually have people in Jamaica calling each other the Dons and things like that, and you know, seeing each other as like this sort of militarized factions and families and things like that. And that's just an effect that's from movies, is basically a point that somebody in the documentary was making.
And in the book, they even bring up Scarface as like all these guys running around acting like the character, right? So, and I definitely get the impression that Elmore Leonard was like writing things he knew about. Like he obviously interacted with people, and he seems like the kind of person who probably did know some actual mobsters, right? And knew like the kind of movies they liked. And, you know, it's a fascinating sort of side effect of these gangster movies is that you then have real life gangsters emulating them.
Right.
And then that circles back around to what this movie is at its core, and that's it's a gangster who wants to become get involved in movie making. And I think there actually is some interesting metaphor in here because even though it's not sort of highlighted in the same way, I was thinking about how he, at the end of the book, we see him wearing this Lakers shirt, and it's very unusual for him to be wearing it in this, you know, big cinematic moment. At the end, he's just wearing like a Lakers t-shirt, and it showed to me like his sort of like he's embracing the LA lifestyle, right. And it looks unusual on him, yet he's still wearing it, you know.
Right, yeah. You can tell that, like, this is his new home. Like, he's glad that he left his, I think Miami was where he was before. He's glad that he left Miami behind. Clearly running from something early in the novel, and then it turned into him finding his new home here and finding where he could use his skills and you know, have the future he wanted to.
All right, so we're getting into it now, so I better start getting some plot described here so we can talk about some specifics.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, so Chili Palmer is a small-time loan shark based in Miami. After a run-in with mobster Ray Bones Barboni, Chili goes to Las Vegas in pursuit of Leo DeVoe, a dry cleaner who has scammed an airline out of $300,000 in life insurance money by faking his own death, as well as avoiding his $10,000 debt to Chili's employers. After relieving Leo of the money in Las Vegas, Chili gambles it all away. However, at the casino, he finds a more interesting assignment. The casino is looking to collect from Harry Zim, a horror film director based in Los Angeles. Chili, himself very interested in the movie business, heads for Los Angeles to make Zim pay. Chili sneaks into the house of actress Karen Flores, where Harry is staying in the middle of the night. After he warns Harry to pay his Las Vegas markers, he explains that he has an idea for a movie. For the movie's plot, Chili recounts Leo's story to Harry in the third person, as if it were a work of fiction. Karen, however, recognizes the premise as a true story and identifies Chili as the unnamed loan shark. All right, so a lot there, and that's just goes to show there's a lot of plot here. There's a lot of plot that unfolds throughout this book.
Yeah, like I said, all over the place. They travel to many different cities and do many different set pieces that sort of culminate in this story. We got to talk about this. I found this to be very funny because the idea of someone breaking into your house as a movie producer to pitch you a film has to be every producer's nightmare, right? Like they're obviously always getting everybody's movie pitches, but this big guy breaks into their house and then he's just like, "Hey, what's up? So I have this idea for a movie." He's like, pay your debts. And by the way, I have this idea for a movie. And then they sit there and pitch it all night till 4 a.m. and like, you know, brainstorm together. And it's just, I found it to be really funny.
Well, yeah. And the movie is about himself. It's his own story. He's the main character of it. Cause at one point, he says like, who's the good guy in this? Like who does the audience root for? And he's like, the loan shark, you know, like obviously, he's the good guy, which I thought was pretty winning. This is where he started to win me over too, because it was so self-aware that I started to like it, you know, started to really like it. It wasn't like I hated it before, but it just really started to win me over. I think around this point.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect because it opened up with sort of your typical gangster setting, and like someone's been wronged. He like gets his coat taken, so he chases after him. They get into fights over it over a couple of years.
You're talking about Ray Bones.
Bones, and he
shoots him in the head, but doesn't kill him. It like skims the top of his head.
Right, and so Ray Bones has this thing out for him for basically the whole story.
This does remind me of a thought I had. Now you haven't seen the movie, but my memory of the movie is that it is actually a lot more of a comedy than I found the book to be, and that was actually kind of a criticism I had for it. It felt like tonally, at times, I didn't know how serious to take it. And it really straddles the line between like a dark comedy and being sort of a serious crime novel.
What,
No, it's not dark, but it takes itself pretty seriously a lot of the time. It felt like to me.
I think it was funny in a way that it was like clever and funny. I think that it was, like you say, it was pretty serious, but at times it felt almost like a fairy tale because of how things were working out for them or weren't working out. So it didn't feel extremely grounded at all times, and that's where I felt like I got some of the humor.
Yeah. Well, and there were absurd scenarios, and I think, but you have to kind of step back from the narrative to appreciate them. Like you said, like when you kind of step back and realize what's happening, him pitching this movie to this guy is just absurd on the surface, and we see that throughout. These really kind of absurdist scenarios play out. So I don't want, like, don't get me the wrong way. It is funny, but it's not funny in the same way the movie is. So I'll be interested to revisit this when we watch it. Yeah. I think the movie is more of a comedy.
I wouldn't consider this to be a comedic book. I wouldn't be like, oh, it's a comedy. Check out this cool, funny comedy. It just happens. It's just got... It has like a dark humor to it. Yeah.
But is it at its core a comedy? I don't know.
Right. And you spoke about tone, and I think that that's something very unique to this story also. Is it's got this, it's like you said, it teeters right between serious and absurdist and while also being compelling. I think it doesn't veer off into absurdity and become sort of just a clusterfuck. It's got a nice engine to it. It really moves forward.
I had a question for you that I wrote while I was reading this. In particular, this scene, I think, when Harry comes down and first sees Chili waiting for him. Harry constantly describes moments through the view of a director, right? Like, he is talking about shots and lighting, and he's like imagining how something would look if it like shot from a certain angle and all this stuff. Like, he's constantly thinking this way.
Right.
Did this strike you as realistic, or did it strike you as like a characterization, like a over-the-top characterization of somebody?
I would say definitely a little bit of both, because I do find myself in general thinking, especially, I mean, for one, when I watch a movie, for sure, but even just in my everyday life, I'll just like look outside and see, oh, it's golden hour basically, or just the way that the light is hitting someone, or like, and just in general, I think like I think about things cinematically, definitely, but I don't think about everything all the time cinematically, if that makes sense. So,
do you think if you'd made 50 movies though, like
maybe?
Do you think it's realistic? You might look
maybe
at it
if I was like Roger Deakins or something, and I'm like this amazing
yeah,
cinematographer. Yeah, I mean, he probably does. He's probably like, give me this lens right now, like thinking like he has a whole film, like a whole camera department with him at all times, and he's like asking the AC for lenses and stuff, and.
I wonder if he said people like that take notes, like, I saw, there was a blue light from a TV that was hitting a glass, and
maybe
it felt like it would have been a really good scene that would have evoked this sort of feeling or something, just to like remember that for later. Like,
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
Well, and in general, I thought that was the strength of this book, because when you got multiple different POVs, and I believed each one of these people, even Karen, when we got Karen POVs, her POV, I was convinced, and I wasn't sure I was going to be, because, like I said, Chili was extremely sexist, and a lot of the characters are here, but it felt almost more like Elmore Leonard was trying to say, like, people like this are sexist, and Hollywood, at least in this time period, and maybe still now, is incredibly sexist, right? So, but yet she was still finding a way to sort of survive in this environment, and it felt like her, and then I think there was like a producer character, Elaine, later. It felt like they kind of knew what the score was and were like trying to find a way to exist in this very hostile environment that Hollywood was at this time.
Well, yeah, and we get people talking about Karen and just like speaking about like why, I think it's Harry specifically talking about why she wouldn't get roles based on like her age or all that sort of stuff. And I guarantee that still happens today. I guarantee that there are producers out there, and I'm not saying it all is like that, but it definitely still happens in basically every field.
I don't know the story behind this movie, but I've been seeing going around on Twitter right now, people are talking about there's a Kevin Bacon film coming out where he's married to with Amanda Seyfried or whatever her name is, and the age difference is something like 27, 28 years or something.
Yeah.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Why are they? I hope that the age difference is like a plot point and not just Hollywood doing its Hollywood thing.
Yeah, that's a
Can't say.
holdover from forever. That I feel like that's always been there, and I think I would like to say that it's been getting better, but I don't know the evidence is really there all the way. It's I think maybe we're getting better, but not quite even close to to all the way there. And yeah, so you're reminding me that just about how what I was talking about before, this viper's nest of Hollywood and the way that we look at Hollywood, implying that and having someone who is an ex-criminal or someone who is involved in the mafia come and be so successful implies that Hollywood is full of crooks and people who who will do anything to get to the top, and how the agents are screwing people over at every turn, how everybody's trying to screw everybody over and it's criminal. And we still, Hollywood accounting is a thing that people talk about a lot, how people get screwed on deals that they have for not gross of the movie, but whatever profits that the movie makes, people are supposed to make money a bit off of that sometimes. And Hollywood accounting makes it so that people never get paid. There's a lot of famous examples. I think even Lord of the Rings is a famous example that I want to say it didn't make, on paper, it almost never made money or something crazy like that. I don't know. It's insane. Yeah. So, it's definitely crooked. There's crooked stuff in the industry. So to call, but it's, I think it's smart to have a character come in and be so successful because of all of that, because of his past, and to have it, sort of lean into the fact that everybody's crooked. And I like when confronted, probably for the first time by Chili, I think it's interesting to see how people react to him sort of mean mugging them, because he has that what's his line, like, look at me, yeah, look at me. Yeah. I like to see how each character is prepared to react to an ex-mobster who's kind of like grilling them.
I just kept thinking about my dogs and how, like, literally, like, watch me is the thing I've had to train them to do. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things they have you train your dogs to do early on, is to, like, make eye contact. So whenever he was saying, look at me, I just kept thinking about, like, that was something that you have to train dogs to do, so they'll actually listen to you and they want to just ignore you.
Yeah.
But it works, right? You make that eye contact. Establish dominance, which he's basically doing. I did want to touch on a little bit of something that's maybe a little bit outside the scope of this book, but it made me think of it. And it felt to me like Elmore Leonard was writing about it indirectly. And that to me was toxic masculinity, which I know is kind of like a loaded term these days, and people think it means different things. And but for me, Chili is a character who he's sort of trapped in his tough guy persona, and Karen represents like a pathway to him actually having like an emotional connection to somebody. And I think it's evidenced when he's in the car with her and she's talking about this movie she's trying to get the role for. And he starts talking to her about it. And it's about a mother and a daughter. And he like says some smart, insightful things about their relationship, this mother and this daughter. And I was surprised because it didn't seem like something that Chili would have opinions about in this way, right? And it also kind of shows that like he is a fan of more movies than just the gangster movies. Like he has seen other kinds of movies and does like them.
Right.
And so that was cool. And then I was thinking about like that's one of the reasons why he likes her so much. But that led me down the pathway of like it's fucked up that a lot of men do feel like they can only have that kind of connection with a woman because they can't have an emotional connection with another man. Like they have to be sort of emotionally closed off and be tough guys and not care about things like how a mother and a daughter relate to each other, right? Like. And how like toxic that is. And it's interesting because I feel like in some ways it felt like Elmore Leonard was talking about that because Hollywood also represented an escape from that life for him in the same way, right? Like the life of having to always be a tough guy. Like he wanted to get involved in art, right? Like, which is inherently not the manliest quote unquote thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is an area I'd like to say I hope that we've gotten better since 1990 in terms of, toxic masculinity and being aware of it.
I mean, I think progressives have gotten better. But...
Yeah, I can only speak from my perspective, so I don't know. I like the idea of Leonard, calling attention to it in 1990 and if that's what he was doing.
He may have been doing it subconsciously. I don't know.
And equating it to Hollywood because a lot of times if you look at main characters, they're sort of the main action hero characters do kind of embody that toxic masculine sort of archetype.
Yeah. Totally out of touch with their feelings. Just, hard-boiled alpha dogs, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Which Chili kind of is, but like he's also kind of a subversion of that trope, right? Because he wants to get involved in movie making, and he kind of, I don't know, it's like he has the skills, but he also seems to hear the call, right, to create art in some way,
right?
Even though he doesn't even really realize it. Like I think at the end when he gets talked about potentially being an actor, like it's the first time he actually considers being in front of the camera and like what that would be like, and he makes fun of like the idea of being in a movie about three men who have to raise a baby, which I thought was a funny reference.
Right.
All right, I'm just gonna move into another chunk of summary here. So Harry asks Chili's help in dealing with a script he wants to buy from his writer's widow, who wants $500,000 for it, and he guaranteed a $200,000 investment from a Beau Catlett, who is a local limo driver and drug dealer, to make another movie named Freaks. It's getting confusing, but bear with me. So Harry gambled Beau's $200,000 away in Vegas in a hope of making the $500,000 he needed for Mr. Lovejoy, which is the name of the script he's trying to buy. In a meeting with Beau, Harry and Chili tell them that their investment in Freaks is sound, but that they are making another movie first. Beau tells them to move the money into the new picture, and Harry says he can't. Meanwhile, Beau is involved in a Mexican drug deal that falls through. He has left the payment in a locker at a Los Angeles airport, but the Colombian sent to receive the money, Yayo, doesn't feel safe unlocking the locker with so many DEA agents standing around nearby. Beau later meets Yayo in the limo garage, and after Yayo threatens to tell the DEA who Beau is, Beau shoots him. All right, so let's talk about Beau Catlett. Let's talk about sort of all these scripts and everything, buying scripts and gambling away money, which seems to be quite a frequent occurrence with these characters.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly all gambling addicts because it's like this isn't money that they can be like, oh, I've made all this money, I can go spend it. This is money that's been set aside for specific projects that, you know what I mean? Like this is money that's set in stone what it's being used for, and to like gamble it away seems very, I mean, obviously irresponsible, but
yeah,
it seems like they might have problems.
Well, and then I think it's equating it to the inherent gamble investing in movies is, right? It's said repeatedly that even investing in a movie is a high-risk gamble.
Right.
And so we meet this Beau Catlett guy. He seems like he's kind of a tough guy, but in like a Hollywood way. I don't know how to describe him. He also seems like he's got some similarities to Chili. He's almost that foil, right, who like represents a lot of the same character traits. He's not as cool, but he is sort of a criminal operating in Hollywood and using his criminality to get ahead.
Right. He's willing to do anything to be involved in this, and he's one of the people trying to claw their way in and claw their way to the top.
This bit of summary also included one of the scenes that I thought was one of the funniest, and that was, and I do remember this scene in the movie being hilarious, and that was Chili sort of coaching Harry on like how this is all going to go down, and he like repeatedly says, they're going to ask you who I am, and you're not going to say anything, and you're not going to tell them anything about me, and it's like, well, you're not going to tell them anything about me. They don't need to know who I am. And then like as soon as he comes in, it's like, who's this? And he's like, oh, that's my associate Chili Palmer. He tells him immediately, and he just looks at him like, Jesus Christ.
And we're getting we're getting Chili's point of view. So he's like immediately like, oh, he's throwing it all to the wind. I can't believe we even had this plan in the first place, because he's just ruining everything. He still tries to take over in certain situations and like sort of grill people, and it still kind of works out, but it just not in nearly the power move that Chili was looking for.
And that's one of the things I was going to say that I love about this scene is that we still see Chili able to assert his presence a little bit, but he's not able to fully dominate the conversation like you think he might have been if Harry had just listened to him. Harry just completely undermines so much of it. But it's fascinating, right? It's throwing a curveball at Chili, and we get to see how he reacts to this curveball. So moving along with the plot, Beau offers the locker money to Harry as an investment and tells him to send Chili to get the money. Chili senses something wrong, signs out a nearby locker as a test, and is taken for questioning by DEA agents. After the questioning, Chili seeks the interests of Michael Weir, a top-tier Hollywood actor, to play the lead role in Mr. Lovejoy. Ray Barboni, after learning about Leo's money from his wife, comes to Los Angeles looking for the money Chili collected from Leo, only to find the key to the locker from the failed drug deal in one of Chili's pockets. Thinking Chili has stashed his cash in a locker, he goes to the airport and is busted by drug officials. Okay, so a lot more plot unfolding here.
So I thought that Michael Weir was an actor that I just had a huge blind spot for. Did you feel the same way? Because I had to go Googling to find out if this is someone that I just completely missed.
No, I was pretty sure he was fictional, but I do love the way that he was so seamless with his threading in of fictional movies, fictional actors, in with like real actors and real movies. So much so that I don't always know, because I'm sure there were a lot of real movies that I thought might have been fictional because I just didn't recognize them.
Yeah, I want to say for the most part, a lot of the ones that I saw were real, or at least were like subtle references in some way to them. But again, this is so much of sort of, I think, maybe what Tarantino takes from an author like Elmore Leonard, because you know, you got your actors, especially with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the one that people will point to, because it's very much a Hollywood film in the way that this is a Hollywood story in this book. And then, you know, you introduce Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt's character, who are a made-up actor and stuntman that were based off of people that Tarantino had interacted with. But just to have that in a story that has all of the references and everything that would ground it and make it feel really real, it makes it seamless. Like you said, it's not jarring in any way. And that's what made me think I had never heard of Michael Weir.
So what did you think of, because once again, the characterization of him was, I thought, really good, but also clearly over the top, right? Like the way he was like so into like,
they were like at the bar, right?
Oh, I'm gonna be you, and he's like, when they meet in the bar that one time, and he starts acting as the character, like as he's talking to them, and he starts teaching him about the look and everything.
Right. He's not. You know, they keep talking about how amazing he is for immersing himself in the roles, and he's not your like Daniel Day-Lewis, right? He's not the sort of understated, amazing performer.
Method actor.
He's like he's very full of himself. Yeah, like he's like, oh, this is how I can turn that accent on in a second. And I know that although he did have some good insight into why maybe someone that was associated with the mafia spoke the way that they did, I thought that was an interesting sort of analysis of that.
I agree. He did have moments where it felt legit, like that's something that an actor might actually say.
Right. But overall, yeah, over the top is a good way to describe him.
Yeah. And it felt like Chili was making fun of him, like a lot of the time, you know what I mean? Or judging him a lot, at least, you know, like judging the way he dressed, and like the way when they meet in the restaurant later, he like orders an omelet at this like fancy restaurant, and he's like, oh, it's just the way actors are, you know?
Yeah. I think Chili wanted to like him at first, like, but I guess this shared history with Karen.
Yeah, so that's another thing. He's got this jealousy, which we've already established early on, because he was talking about how he once dated like a go-go dancer or something, but he couldn't. I think he even says he fell in love with a go-go dancer. I think it was a go-go dancer, might have been something else, but he couldn't stand all the men looking at her all the time, so he had to break it off or something.
Right.
Which shows like how he is, right? So when he keeps thinking about like, he's like, well, I don't know why I don't like him. Like, we know why. He used to be with Karen, who you have feelings for. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that on top of the fact that he sort of, you know, they did meet before, but he feels like I don't know, maybe there's like a respect thing that he feels like, although he said in the story early on, Chili said that he wasn't really interested in the respect or anything that came with being in the mafia. Michael had come at some point to sort of meet up with them somewhere in Brooklyn or somewhere in New York or something like that.
I wasn't clear if like if he was actually there or if he just said he was there. Was he actually there, you think?
Oh, I'm not sure. I hadn't even thought about it like that. I just assumed he was.
Because I think there was a conversation with Harry where he was saying something like, it seems like the kind of guy who would go to like research actual mobsters, and then Harry's like, yeah, he totally did that. And then later when they were talking, he's like, yeah, you met me in Brooklyn, and he's like, yeah, I think I remember you. And I thought maybe he was just lying and saying that he was there.
Yeah, I guess he is from Miami anyway, so I don't know why.
Although I think he did spend some time in Brooklyn. I'm not really clear on it. I don't know. I could see it going either way, so I'm not really sure. But, you know, I think your point's well taken there. And I don't know. I really enjoyed this actor character, even while clearly he was being made fun of.
Right. That reminds me something I wanted to say about all the characters. You know, we talked about the dialogue, and we've definitely talked about a lot of the characters, but there was this sort of energetic. This is something else that made me think of sort of the fairy tale nature of it is, and maybe it had something to do with like maybe not glorifying, but there's something magical maybe about Hollywood is what's being implied.
Yeah.
Just that everyone's so energetic and lively and such a character, and so interesting in their own way. And there's really no boring people within the story.
No, a lot of colorful characters, they just kind of leap off the page. You touched on sort of Hollywood, the dream of Hollywood, is sort of ever present in this book, right? And we see all these characters chasing it and imagining themselves in movies and then like even Beau Catlet, he stands out on his balcony and he like dreams about how he wants to be a part of these people's lives that he can hear, like having a party in the distance. He's like, I just want to be like one of these people, like having a pool party.
Yeah. I felt like to me that implied he was just looking for fame and like he wanted to be famous
But what's fascinating is also like I don't think he knew for certain that those were that was just a fantasy that he had about who these people might have been. It almost seemed like it was this unattainable thing to me. Like everybody was chasing something else that was out of reach.
Yeah, even no matter what the status, like Harry's a fairly successful producer, still chasing the Hollywood bug, still chasing everyone's after it. Everyone wants the fame, the fortune, the artistry. Everybody wants to be seen in this light and have that legacy.
And no matter what you have achieved, it's not enough, right? And that's and that's a risk. I mean, I think we see that. I see that in the writing world a lot too. Authors always talking about how, never like you have to like take a moment, allow yourself to appreciate what you have achieved, whether it's a very small amount or it is a good amount. But because if you are always feeling like it's not enough and you're always chasing the next thing, that's just a recipe for being unhappy all the time.
Right.
All right, let's read the final bit of plot here, and then we can sort of sum up our thoughts on this. In a final showdown with Beau, Chili is held at gunpoint. One of Catlet's henchmen, known as the Bear, arrives just in time to apprehend Catlet, and in the struggle for the gun, Catlet falls through the railing of his sun deck. As Chili recounts his story to Karen and Harry, it shares some comparisons with Mr. Lovejoy. The book ends with Chili pitching the plot of the movie about his own adventures in Hollywood, insulting Michael, and saying, quote, "Fucking endings, man. They weren't as easy as they looked."
I like that a lot.
Yeah, very, very sort of metafiction moment there at the end. It's like literally the last line of the novel.
And to have the story mirror, I knew that was always going to be the case. The story that they didn't have an ending to, having it mirror the real life that goes on with him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really perfect. Nice little bow.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Bear, the stuntman, because that was one thing that it didn't quite strike me as realistic. From everything I know about stuntmen these days, and I've learned about, like, the idea that this guy would be sort of so easily bested by Chili Palmer, I don't know. Like, I get that, like, he tries to sort of describe it as, like, oh, when I fall, I land on a bag, like, when something comes at me, I know it's coming. But from everything I've heard, like, stuntmen are actually tough as fucking nails people. And, you're not just going to punch them a couple times and they're going to be, like, on the ground wheezing. Like, they take hits for a living, you know?
I think it's got to do with the fairy tale aspect of the story.
It's funny, right? It's funny.
Right, and we can dig into it with the comparison to, once again, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which, has other baggage there with it because it's Bruce Lee, but, people were upset, for many, many reasons. One being, just overall having the one Asian character be the one who gets taken down by the white main character.
But then also it's a real person who was really legendary for his fighting prowess, and
versus this fictional character that beat him and all this stuff. So anyway, barring all that, that he's trying to tell a certain story with his narrative, with his main characters. So like the idea that this big brute of a mafia guy could best this stuntman, I guess in this case, is just what he wanted to go with. And again, maybe it's a fairy tale, maybe it's all sort of the idea of like, you think about telling a story and like who, the commentary that Chili was making, where he's like, who's supposed to be the main character, who's supposed to be the person we root for. Maybe there's a commentary being made there with like, the main character in a story like this specifically is gonna come out on top.
Yeah. Well, so this final confrontation with the handrails, did you see this coming? Did you know this was going to happen?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so you didn't know, like when they were having the confrontation and he was describing to him, "Oh, you're going to back up by the railing." Did you know at least at that point that he was going to fall through the railing? Or were you
Yeah, I
completely
mean,
surprised?
once it was like sort of imminent danger there, I think I got it.
Okay, you were like, all right. I don't know. I just think it was interesting. And then like the book ending, talking about how endings are difficult, right? And the comparisons being made. I kept thinking about how like it works as sort of a metafictional way, but like this whole book is about a movie, so it feels incomplete. Like I felt like I need to see a movie about this now, because the movie, he says at one point it could be called Get Michael, and then he's like, no, I'm getting that confused with my real life, where we're trying to get Michael to be in this movie, and then he insults Michael by calling him short, and then we see that the name of the book is Get Shorty, so it's like a joke, which like doesn't really work that well for me. But whatever, that's what it is.
Yeah, it took me. I could, up until the end, I was like, really, it was because it was weighing on me. I was like, the whole time I was like, I wonder what this Shorty, like, where are we leading to with this title? And then, ultimately at the end, Get Shorty, like, once it's made clear, I'm still kind of puzzled that like this is what he chose for the title, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, even so, that's the name of this book, but it's also implied to be the name of the movie, right? So if you have a movie called Get Shorty and you have the same events unfold, you're going to be left with a sense at the end of, oh, so the movie they had made is the movie that I am now watching.
Right. It's very like, it's getting into adaptation territory.
Yes. And I think that's why it works better as a movie. I think fundamentally, to me. Because as a book, there's like a different layer there, because you're reading a book already, and they're not talking about writing a book about this.
Right.
If he was talking about writing a book about this thing, and like, I finally figured out what I'm going to call this book, and it's Get Shorty, and I'm going to write this book, like, then you would go, oh, okay, I'm reading the book that he wrote. But instead it's a movie, right? So when we watch the movie later, I think that's in my head, is it's like, this is the movie of the story that we are watching, I
mean, you have to think of it as like sort of the head canon and sort of the canon of the story. Like maybe what we're seeing in the film is meant to be a representation of what, not the book, but what movie that they're making in the book.
Yeah. And then when you talk about fairy tales, it's like, well, yeah, it's because we're watching a movie and everything's changed. Like the reason he's able to best this guy is because it's a movie. We're watching a movie. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You can get into that territory, and that'll be fun to revisit, I think, next week. I'm really excited to watch this movie coming up. I definitely am going to have a new perspective on it now after reading this book. I also do really want to get into some more Elmore Leonard. There's multiple options there we could go with. So if you are an Elmore Leonard fan, definitely write in and let us know. Would you like to hear us cover 3:10 to Yuma? Would you like to hear us touch on Justified in some way? One of those other ones we listed. I think there were a few more.
Jackie Brown's top of my list.
Jackie Brown, yeah. We can talk about Tarantino, which we've never done before. As controversial a figure as he is, I think we'd have a lot to say.
As controversial as he is, I don't think it's undeniable that he's been one of the like the lightning rods of the film industry. There's a reason he makes great films, and I think people react either positively or negatively to the movies and also what goes on outside of the movies.
And the stuff he says and everything else surrounding it, and sort of like a discussion about art and like what makes good art and what should we be trying to say with our art and all those things. He's a fascinating character for a lot of reasons. But yeah, if you want to have any suggestions about that, definitely write into inktofilm@gmail.com and let us know. But we're going to be back next week for the film Get Shorty, which should be really fascinating to talk about, especially since you've never seen it. So I'm excited to get into that. I do want to thank Jamie D again for commissioning this. She's been a longtime supporter of ours at one of our highest tiers, and our highest tier. And shout out to her. Yeah,
she's a jukebox hero, and she has been for a little while now. And honestly, I just want to give her props because this is a really fascinating project to get the chance to cover. And this was a blind spot for me. So to get to, I think that it works so perfectly for what we're trying to do with the podcast, and the idea of a book having commentary on Hollywood and films in general is just like, it's so in our wheelhouse. It's so within the framework of what I think we're trying to do here.
Yeah, it's been cool. And if you wanted to find out how you could commission a project of your own, visit our Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm. you find out about being a jukebox hero, and then also on our website, Ink to Film, you can find a list of potential projects that we haven't covered yet that you can unlock through doing that. We also have lower tiers that are less, and we get bonus episodes on there. We release new bonus episodes every month. I think we got like 25 of them out there now. A lot of cool stuff, so definitely check that out.
Make sure you connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all of those at Ink to Film. And please join the Council of Inklings. We post polls in there. I think our last project, Total Recall, was a poll that we posted, was the winner of the poll that we posted in there. We post adaptation news. We post all kinds of adaptation or film or book related materials. Anything we see that could be a potential project, or just things we find interesting. We post all that in the Council of Inklings on Facebook.
And if you liked this episode, please let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever podcast app you use. It's a good way to get the word out and continue to help our podcast to grow.
Thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music. So I had one last thing I wanted to talk about here at the end. Mm-hmm. Harry calls his production company Zigzag Production, and at one point, I think it's Chili who's sort of analyzing it. It's either Chili or Harry who's either self-analyzing it, but he says, Zig for the maniac, escaped lunatic, and dope-crazed biker pictures. Zag for the ones featuring mutations fed on nuclear waste. Your slime people, your 7-foot rats, your maggots the size of submarines.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty fun.
I just found that to be one of the most like batshit crazy like paragraph lines in the story.
Yeah. I mean, I can I assume all of these movies are fictional, but I can picture these kinds of B horror movies, right, in this time period. I actually had a quote here that I wanted to we can sort of ponder as we go. He says, quote, "How many people know who wrote the movies they saw?" Which I thought was, it kind of hurt me because that's not something we often talk about. I feel like that's something we haven't done a great job about, talking about who wrote the screenplay for everything we've covered. So I think it's also because it's an adaptation. So I always feel like screenplays are like adapted screenplays, like they're not original screenplays.
Yeah, and do you think he might be implying like if a film has been based off a book? Because I feel like that's the case, and I think that's what we try to do here. We try to very specifically key in and call attention to. I think there are plenty of movies in our back catalog that most people aren't aware based on a book. Yeah. So I'm happy that we're calling attention to that at least. But
Elmore Leonard, maybe that was him sort of, referencing himself, like, hey, pay attention to me when you see this movie one day. I actually wrote this thing. And there was a character in the book that keeps being talked about, and he's like, why would he write this book if not for money? And he's like, there is no other reason. I don't know. I just thought that was funny too. Like, like the Hollywood couldn't even comprehend another reason to write a novel other than to try and get a movie with, Michael Weir in it, starring it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we've gone long, so until next time.
Thanks for listening.